Senator King addressed the secretary with a pointed remark, expressing confusion. "Mr. Secretary, I'm somewhat puzzled," he began. "I grew up in Virginia where Robert E. Lee was revered. When I was a kid, his birthday was even a school holiday. But as I grew older and learned more about American history, I realized that he fit the classic definition of a traitor. He took up arms against his country. He broke his oath as a member of the United States Army, which he took upon. Entering West Point, King questioned the secretary's rationale. Why are you going through these incredible gymnastics, finding current soldiers or others to rename? You slipped a minute ago. You said we're returning these bases to their original names. The moment cut through the noise. Senator King wasn't just questioning the renaming of military bases formally honoring Confederate leaders. He was directly challenging the romanticized narrative around men like Robert E. Lee. Lee wasn't a misunderstood Southern hero. He was a U.S. Army officer who led an armed rebellion and fought to preserve slavery. That's not heritage. It's treason. And yet, for decades, the United States has trained soldiers at bases named after such men. King's argument extended beyond bureaucratic decisions to a larger moral clarity. Why are we still debating whether to glorify enemies of the United States? This wasn't about erasing history. It was about refusing to celebrate betrayal. If acknowledging the truth made people uncomfortable, maybe it should. Continuing his remarks, King zeroed in on the absurdity of continuing to honor Confederate generals. Robert E. Lee, leading general of the Confederacy. Pickett, the other. Names. Why are you doing this? I don't understand what the motivation is. To rename bases for people who took arms against their country on behalf of slavery. What possible motivation can there be for this? Who is telling you to do this? Who is urging you to do this? In response, the secretary offered a defense rooted in tradition and sentiment. Senator, the veterans and service members across the country who have deployed from Fort Bragg or Fort Benning or Fort Hood or Fort Pickett, there's a legacy. There's a connection to those bases and to those places, to what they trained for there, what they did for, and what they came home back to. That matters to them. Ask enough of them, as I do all the time, before and later, and we recognize the service of those who were put into the replacement. He emphasized that no one was disputing the honor or service of these veterans, arguing instead that renaming the bases would mean erasing the history that many service members feel connected to. King pushed back, unwilling to let the sentiment override the ethics. He pointed out the contradiction at the heart of the secretary's logic. Talk to people that serve at Bragg. Ask people that serve at Fort Bragg or Fort Benning. He was highlighting the fallacy of nostalgia. These bases weren't simply locations. They were named after men who fought against the United States in defense of slavery. Preserving those names for tradition's sake wasn't historical preservation. It was historical gaslighting. Nobody was erasing the past, King insisted. The goal was to stop honoring traitors with taxpayer-funded monuments. If the only connection someone had to a base was its name, and that name represented treason, it was time to reevaluate what that bond meant. The military wasn't just about loyalty, it was about values. Continuing to name federal property after Confederate generals wasn't about honoring heritage. It was about institutionalizing betrayal. The secretary added, if they like the fact that the names have been returned, and to a man and to a woman, they will tell you, thank God we're back to Fort Bragg, and thank God we're back. He mentioned that there were plenty of heroic figures with silver stars or medals of honor who could be honored instead, but that Congress had limited the options. So this is something we've been proud to do, something that's important for the morale of the Army. And those communities appreciate that we've returned it back to what it was, instead of trying to play this game of erasing names. King responded with gravity. We're not erasing history, Mr. Secretary. We're recognizing history and recognizing that mistakes have been made in this country. The greatest of all was the Civil War, where people took up arms against their country on behalf of the institution of slavery. And to continue the practice of recognizing those people and honoring them by the naming of these bases is, I believe, an insult to the people of the United States. The conversation then shifted to budget concerns. King asked why the defense budget was being presented in two pieces. I don't understand why the budget is coming to us in two pieces. Why not give us an honest base budget instead of putting a piece of it in reconciliation? He criticized the Office of Management and Budget's apparent plan to keep defense spending flat over the next 4 or 5 years and questioned whether Congress would need to use reconciliation every year. Moving forward, why not give us an honest budget, telling us what your priorities are, and then we can consider it? This committee always works in a bipartisan basis on a defense budget. We all want to see some increases in the defense budget, and yet you're giving us this fake, here's a piece of the budget, here's another. You're cutting in the base budget. You're cutting shipbuilding in half and saying, well, we're going to make it up in reconciliation? Are we going to have reconciliation every year? He warned that this method placed a significant Part 10 to 15% of the defense budget into a wholly partisan decision-making process, breaking from this committee's history of bipartisan cooperation. Why are we doing it this way? Senator King was exposing what many might call one of Washington's dirtiest little secrets, the way the defense budget is strategically split to obscure reality. By questioning the tactic of bifurcating the defense budget, King was demanding transparency. His concern was that partisan-driven funding could erode 10 to 15% of defense readiness without proper oversight. It wasn't just about fiscal management. It was about national security and trust. Political maneuvering, dressed up as budget strategy, risked undermining both. The Secretary responded, Senator, from our view that budget number 961 meets the requirements and threats that we face. King corrected him. That's not the number. The number is 892.6. You're adding reconciliation. That's my whole point. Why not give us a base budget of 961 or whatever the right number is, what you consider the right number, and then we can operate and make our decisions? Why do it in this bifurcated way that really is fooling the American people about what the defense budget is? The Secretary insisted, we're not trying to fool anybody, sir. It's 2 bills, 1 budget. We're working with OHM, and we feel very comfortable with the number of 961 billion. But King pressed again. Why don't you give us a straight-up budget for the Defense Department? That's my question. The Secretary reiterated, this is a straight-up budget for the Defense Department. It's a 13% increase over what Joe Biden gave us. But King wasn't convinced. It's a 2-part defense budget. Part of it is in reconciliation instead of in the budget that's being presented to this committee. This committee only has a partial review of the budget. I don't understand why we can't have an honest, straightforward budget instead of this son of OO that you're putting over on us. He ended sharply. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator King had just cut through the smokescreen and demanded something rare in politics: honesty. His questioning of Pete Hegseth about the Defense Department's budget exposed a tactic that allows Congress to manipulate trillions in spending under the guise of procedural legitimacy. Instead of a transparent base budget, the process was convoluted with reconciliation gimmicks designed to sneak cuts or hikes past oversight. King wasn't buying it, and neither should the public. Funding the world's most powerful military requires a budget that can withstand scrutiny. This wasn't just about fiscal discipline. It was about restoring trust in how America prepares for its defense. If even the Pentagon's budget can't survive the light of day, maybe it's time to ask what exactly we're protecting.